You have to deal with the fact that I have a weird delay. I'm sorry.
That's all right. No worries. It's just Zoom. There's the Zoom delay, and then there's rural Wisconsin
Zoom
Zoom
is
delay.
really bad because I'm
Oh,
right.
no, we did.
There totally is. And I'm a terrible interrupter, which makes Zoom like the worst platform for my communication style.
Yeah, you just operate at a different speed than the rest of us. We're all just too slow.
It's likely. Yeah.
Well, anyways, we're recording. We're here in the studio. This is the first of the 2021 seasonal and fun.
I know. I still have New York speed.
That's right. Exactly. So this is the first episode of the season, and we've got Kat Becker out in Athens, Wisconsin. She's got the rural internet connection, so there might be some delay, some in and out, but we're gonna push through. We're gonna persevere. We've got Jeremy Solon, Cat Maple Syrup right here, Stevens Point, Wisconsin. Or are you in the sugar bush right now?
Oh, I wish I were in the sugar bush. I'm sitting in my house. But good
There
to be
we
here.
go. So I love of all the seasonal books I read every year, I love the ones that start with spring. So like if we could just change the calendar year to start with spring, I'd be a fan. I'd sign off on that. So here we are, spring. Nothing more exciting than sap season. So I got two friends that are passionate about sap, passionate about spring, the land, all those good things. So here we are, rocking and rolling. Who wants to go first? Just a quick who you are, just for everybody that may have not listened to previous podcasts or know who you are. Who wants to jump first?
Cat should go first. Otherwise she'll interrupt me.
I'll have a great, I know, like 20 seconds in, you'll start talking and then I've interrupted you. So I am Kat Becker. I have Cattail Organics in Athens, Wisconsin. And my farm is a 50-acre plot of land. About 50% of it is woods and the other 50% is open farmland and brush. And we have about 20 acres of land in maple woods, although we have only this year, we're going to tap the most trees that we've tapped since I moved to this farm in 2017. And so that's going to be about like 260, 270, which is probably a third of our trees. And we produce maple syrup, but most of our income for our family comes from vegetables. So maple syrup is something that we're developing more. It's one of the few areas of growth on the farm. Everything else, we're just kind of trying to keep at the scale it's at. But other than that, uniquely, our maple syrup is certified organic. I can talk about what that means, which it means nothing in certain ways, but something in other ways, depending on what sap you're comparing it to. So there's that.
I like it. I like it.
That'll be a good topic. We should talk about the organic certification. That'll be good. I'm Jeremy Solon, co-owner of Tapped Maple Syrup. We make maple syrup on land north of Anigo, where my family's been for just over 100 years. And Tapped Maple Syrup focuses on infused, barrel-aged, and pure maple syrup. Do a lot of playing around with maple syrup and doing some crazy stuff, and lots of collaboration, making fun syrup. So yeah, super excited for this time of year. I actually used up the last of 2020 maple syrup today. Like it's done, and we need the trees to run now.
There's nothing like driving business than when you run out of inventory.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're at the whims of nature.
Completely. Yeah. Like all farming, that's true, but it seems like particular maple syrup. I mean, you can have a fantastic year, or you can have a nothing year, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't irrigate, you can't, none of those things. But Cat deals with that all year round, though.
She gets it.
I only have to deal with it in the spring.
So maple syrup is particularly bad, though.
I like it. Thank you for sharing all that. So part of the seasonal and fun tour is exactly that, learning more about regional, sustainable, regenerative foods here in Wisconsin, or maybe the Midwest in a larger picture, just and then bringing it into kind of the health and fitness sphere, because I see a lot of um, great things in health and fitness, wellness, but a lot of it's kind of fragmented, or it's grabbed from somewhere off in the distance. The whole like grass is greener on the other side thing happens a lot. And I want to kind of paint a bigger picture of what's going on here in Wisconsin, and where all of these things kind of play a part in the ecosystem, in the economy, and then also obviously, I love sampling all of Jeremy's concoctions with maple syrup. So that's also why we're here. So
That's right.
I guess with that, where do we want to start? Do we want to start kind of environmentally? What's going on with maple trees, maple sap, and then we can touch on environmentalism and more economics from there, I guess. Or I should say we should then go to economics. That's what I meant to say.
Sounds good.
Sweet.
So I can, I mean, I can kick things off just because this is what's in the top of my mind. True, the maple syrup or maple sap runs, what we call runs, flows out of the trees for a pretty short amount of time in the spring. You basically need freezing temperatures at night, temperatures above freezing during the day, like that fluctuation 25 to 40, 45 is kind of ideal conditions. And as we were saying before, that season varies every year depending on the weather. But the interesting thing that's happened during the course of my life, growing up on that land and tapping trees from essentially the time I can remember, is that the season has shifted by at least 3 weeks already. In I'm not that old. I mean, I'm a little older, but my pretty much every year my dad says, we might want to think about tapping now, but it's not April 1st, and we always tap around April 1st. And I'm like, Dad, we haven't tapped around April 1st for a long time. We used to do that, but it's been a long time. Now we'll be tapping this weekend. And that's essentially where we've been for the last five plus years, probably going on 8 years now, early March instead of late March, early April. So the season has shifted a lot. Fortunately for us, it hasn't shortened. It's still the same length. It just happens earlier in the year. So that's the direct impact of shifting climate, in a way that we can see it very, very easily.
Yeah, definitely. Kat, what about you? I know just read your post. There was one season you missed sapping. So how many has it been total?
Season that I was directly involved was 2005, and then I moved to Athens in 2006. So it's been like 15 years. I'm creepily in my car now, so they get to see my darks. Yeah. So I missed 2017 in my farm transition, even though I had a beautiful maple. And that was really interesting because on my old farm, we worked along with my now ex-father-in-law, but there was about 2,000 trees and lots of neighbors bringing in sap. And it was like a good old boys kind of feel to the sugar shack. So like not probably the best place for me as an individual. And our maple syrup shack now is kind of, I'd say, old style, small flat pan, all wood, no RO. We're kind of at this tiny scale, and we are going to be investing in like a more reasonable shack in the next couple of years with a lot of the upgrades that you have to make if you're going to go beyond a certain scale, just based on what the state of Wisconsin wants. But it's really nice now. We were talking about how much we're going to kind of be sad to have a real shack because we have more lean-to style, and we can like watch the snowfall, and we're out in the woods, and it's like a different feel than boiling down. And that's something that's kind of really nice at this point. It only takes us a couple hours to collect, even with small children. So that's kind of I guess Jeremy and I are probably both really unusual though, because he uses buckets and we use bags and buckets. And a lot of producers use maple syrup. They use lines or pressurized lines. So you have maybe not a representative sample, but there's some really nice reasons to keep the woods full of lines, especially if you like the woods at other times of year. So there's that too. But yeah, I've been doing it for about 15 years, I guess. Feels like it's gone by pretty fast.
Nice. I like it. And just for perspective for people listening, I have 5 maple taps in my backyard. So
Perfect.
So all red maples. I really want to touch on the importance of this year, just like backyard perennial food systems. I think a lot of people they see the big setups or the ones that have been around for, decades. In Jeremy's case, they've been there for over 100 years. But just the importance each of us can take kind of doing this in the backyard if we can. I know I've got a friend down in Stoughton. She has one Norway maple, I believe it is. Is that a
Yeah,
maple?
that's a maple. Yeah.
She's got one of those and she does a tap every year in this tree. But it's things like that. She gets, I think 2 pints-ish usually a year. But it's something we can all do that's going to kind of lessen our dependence on big ag or kind of this industrial food system that we've got going on in the country. So just adding that little snippet that it's doable in the backyard. It's a lot of fun, like they're both saying. We enjoy it.
For sure.
And I just love maple syrup.
Yeah. And the great thing about maple syrup season too is, a couple of things, but one, the main thing that I love about it is you're in the woods or in your yard, basically, through this amazing transition, like from, full dormancy in the forest, or, your trees are completely shut down, in the course of a few weeks, they're full of life. So you basically get to see that whole transition. And a lot of times that goes by so fast that you don't really pay attention, but maple syrup season and the running of sap kind of makes you pay attention and connects you to that amazing process. And so when you start, there's snow on the ground, and by the time you're done, there are flowers blooming and migratory birds are back and chipmunks are awake, and all that stuff happens kind of, right in front of you, which is the beautiful thing about this time of year.
Definitely. Love it. I have no idea. I'm terrible. My friend Kelly's gonna be mad at me. I'm not a bird nerd like Jeremy or my friend Kelly, but there's all these like little birds in trees I can't really see, but they're super loud right now. Jeremy, with that in-depth description, would you be able to help a guy out?
Yeah, the really little ones that are loud. Chickadees, maybe.
Maybe they're just fired up right now.
Yeah,
that shows you the in-depth knowledge I have of anything that's not a game bird. Useless. I'm working on it. I'm getting better.
That's right. Yeah, it's chickadee kind of nest, or not nesting, but courting season. So they're singing a lot more right now and pretty active, and get pretty excited when the sun's out. So
that's definitely what it is.
Could be them.
Yeah.
Or crows.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
crows.
the crows are definitely out, because those are big enough that even I can see, and my dogs are absolutely just they're ready to riot with the crow activity over our house. For them, there's no reason a bird should be flying over our house repeatedly. So
yeah,
the dogs get angry and just they're on patrol in the yard.
Yeah,
the crows come through.
I don't want to take us too far afield here, but when you said that the crows are out, it made me remember that there was a time where I would say people from Western society didn't understand what happened to animals in the winter, like birds, and they actually thought that they slept under the snow. And so like saying the crows are awake right now or here, like makes me think of that. Like, can you, like, that's a crazy idea that like birds couldn't have been strong enough or smart enough to figure out to go south. They had to
Yep.
just like figure out how to bury themselves in the snow because we couldn't see them.
Well,
And
I mean, and there maybe they just were going off of grouse and like when grouse burrow in the
Yep.
snow, right? Like there's that one instance where the grouse actually does, and they just applied it to everything else.
Right.
I like it. All right. Kat, are you good? You situated in the vehicle?
Yeah, I'm good. I just said that's amazing. That's it. My just delayed slow comment to the conversation.
Oh, there you go. I like it. So you've both, Jeremy's been doing this a while. Kat, you've been doing it for a while. I think we touched on it a little bit, but where does it kind of fit in within the family dynamic? What's the significance it plays in each of your families and or your business?
I think Jeremy has like a more compelling multi-generational story, so I'll be brief. But although, you know, based on the foraging and everyone can be part of maple syrup, right? I grew up in New York City, so not tapping any trees, but definitely eating some maple syrup. And I do want to mention that I do think that North Central Wisconsin has a better terroir or flavor than the Northeast. I think it's pretty easy to like actually test that. It's a little vanilla-ier around here, smoother, less sharp. I think there's also a lot less low-grade syrup mixed in. I think the Northeast has this other dynamic, just in terms of production and branding. But aside from that, you know, for our family, we do maple syrup and we start up our greenhouse pretty much at the same time every year. And so it's this like super ritual into spring, you know, like we're just tapping trees, like Jeremy kind of mentioned, we're watching spring kind of unfold. And the same thing is happening in our greenhouse. You know, we're watching seeds. We plant a lot of onions and then we plant a lot of microgreens for ourselves at the same time of year. So we're kind of starting to get the first tastes of syrup and the first green things all at the same time. And it fits really nicely in with our season. It's kind of the preseason game before we're doing work in the fields or even in our hoop houses. And then in terms of our family, I mean, I think I just kind
Uh-oh, you broke up, Kat.
summarize the scale that we're at. But we last year produced about 40 gallons of maple syrup off of just under 200. Oh no, am I bad?
It got a little
Can you hear
spotty
me?
there. It got a little spotty.
I'll make my video go away. Is that better?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, I'll try. You can edit it and make it sound, but you know, kind of the greenhouse season in our shop. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
And that kind of ushers us into spring. And then at a family level, you know, we produced last year about 40 gallons of maple syrup. I think we'll probably end up tapping out, like scaling out at probably around 75. And our focus has always been on having syrup for our CSA and doing a little bit of market sales. And we haven't really focused on the retail side of things. And that is something we might develop with our neighbors. My wonderful employee is starting her own farm that touches our farm, and what connects us is maple woods. And so we've talked about the potential of tapping together. But we have it integrated pretty much into our CSA and direct marketing outlets. So that's how it fits into our farm. But it's a really like beautiful season. I think Jeremy said it. It's so nice to be in the woods. It's everything coming alive. And so I think, you know, we're trying to create more opportunities to do more maple syrup because it's such a nice time of year when we're not doing other things. And the pace for us, at least, is not super intense. And so that's another thing. And we like it that way because then like our kids don't find it alienating. So it's kind of a fun family activity versus like grueling labor, which vegetable farming can be.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's great, Kat. Yeah. Yeah, for us, I mean, similar in a lot of ways. So as I mentioned, I grew up making syrup, and some of my earliest memories are hanging out in the woods with my dad and uncle, tapping trees and cooking syrup and all of that. And that's an experience I wanted to have for our kids as well, and we're lucky to be able to do that. The the thing that really drove the creation of Tapped as a business is trying to figure out what happens to the land in my generation and kids' generation after my dad is gone, which is a huge issue ac- across the country and beyond in agriculture. Trying to figure out how you do this land transition in a way that makes sense, and making sure it doesn't get gobbled up into the industrial commodity agricultural world. I think Wendell Berry, to paraphrase him, but basically said, if you can't figure out a use for your land, it's going to get determined for you, basically, right? If you can't figure out a way to make a living off your land, it's going to get gobbled up by someone else's interests probably aren't yours. And so that idea is what's driven us to figure this out from a business standpoint of how can we generate some revenue off that land, allows us to keep it in the family and keep taking care of it, and then how do we kind of expand that out to other small maple syrup producers as well. So that, like I said, it has driven kind of how we've approached it. And the thing that we've been incredibly fortunate about is that my dad and mom are still involved on the land, our kids, and we get to be out there working with them. Um, and it's anybody who's done physical labor, knows that there's a different connection that happens when you're working together than necessarily when you're even just recreating together.
Mhm.
And I really value that, and that's really good for our kids, and just a fun part of that experience. And we're trying to be at a scale that continues to make sense, that like Kat referenced, that it's not just some intense work all the time, that our kids get to enjoy the time in the woods and being with my parents and everybody else that comes out in the woods with us.
I like it. You you both mentioned kind of the ritual aspect of the event spring of sap running, which I completely agree with. I as someone who enjoys the outdoors, like being in the woods right now in spring is just absolutely fantastic. I love it. Every moment of it, from the from the sky, the chickadees making their racket in the trees and the trees starting to bud. Within the trees themselves, we got the sap, and then the ground, like the snow is vanishing and more of the earth is kind of revealing itself. Taking that idea of ritual, and then you both mentioned it in your families. I love that too. Just the work, the knowing your land, and like I said earlier, this could just be in your backyard, right? Like a family, you've got a couple taps in your yard, just the work involved there, the ritual of it, working together, cooking the sap into syrup, figuring out, what size, what kind of jars you're going to put it in. I always love that, like just all the different varieties of jars you can have for syrup and what people select and why. So there's the ritual of food. I want to keep diving into that kind of with like the educational piece you both have. I loved Taps. You're inviting people out into the sugar bush. Kat, pre-COVID, you're at all different events, teaching people like what to buy, how to cook. You've come onto the SeasonalAF meal prep series, and everybody loved it. Like they love your energy, they love what you're teaching, how you're teaching. Can each of you kind of talk about that more, the educational part of the ritual as well as what you're doing?
Sure. I'm just taking my turn, Jeremy. If you want to interrupt me,
Perfect.
you can.
Go for it.
So for maple syrup, I mean, it's interesting you bring this up because part of our, long-term, I shouldn't say long-term. By long-term, I mean like 3-year plan to put in a better shack. Part of it is about how we set up the woods to make it more accessible. to bringing people out, because I have to say one of the things that I love the most about the woods that we have, and even the way it was used before when I tapped it with, my ex-husband's family, because we use the same woods that we use now as like an addition, is there's something about the way that our land is laid out. It's kind of this big, it's a square. That means that you have people kind of working in every corner at the same time. It's this really like beautiful rhythm of how sap gets collected, and the layout of the woods really determines how it gets collected. And so our woods always had these kind of small teams of people kind of working in different corners and then coming together at the center. And I love that. And our neighbors who have Red Door Family Farm, they always bring their girls out and we all collect sap together. But the idea of having more people participate in that is something that I want. And definitely in post-COVID times, that becomes more accessible. I mean, the other thing about maple syrup, and I'm sure Jeremy will touch on this, is like, it is sugar, it's incredibly good. From a, mammal perspective, we're drawn to it in this really intense way. But it also is this way that we get to, sugar is kind of the devil. Everyone loves talking about that, but maple syrup, you're making it yourself and you get to indulge in it in these ways that's just like beautiful and seasonal as well. And so, that's something I'm excited to share with people, and definitely with our family, where we are drinking cold sap, and then, we're drinking kind of part boiled down sap. And then you get to the, I don't know if Jeremy does this with his family, but the sugar on snow, kind of pouring out, maple syrup onto snow and rolling it up, or making snow cones. I mean, all of that, I think, is like part of the richness of local food and celebrating what, actually eating things right from the earth. And that's one of the things about maple syrup that I love the most. I mean, I will tell you, I don't have a sweet tooth, which I know a lot of people do not identify with. But I still love maple syrup. I'm more of like a kimchi kind of a person. I could eat like a gallon of kimchi, but I love maple syrup because of all of those rituals and ties to the land, and the fact that it changes flavor throughout the season and you can taste those differences. I mean, I think, as humans, we clearly have had these experiences with food over time, but being able to share that with people is something really wonderful. And up until this point, we've really shared it mostly with family and friends. And I think the idea of expanding it, especially to people's backyards, like a lot of people in Wisconsin have like turkey burners for deep frying fish. Like you can use those simple propane burners to cook outside. I mean, you can use wood fire. There's all types of things you can use, but it's pretty easy, given how much people love to cook outside in the winter in Wisconsin, to adapt that system to maple syrup. So there's my my food celebration related spiel. That I love talking about vegetables with people, which people are less attracted to than maple syrup. But maple syrup is a super beautiful food for so many reasons.
I love it.
That was
I love it.
perfect. I don't have much to add to that. The one the one piece I will add, a little bit different layer of this, maybe is give a shout out to Jerry John Drew for this. So Jerry's Ojibwe tribal member up in Michigan on Lake Superior, and I got to meet him a little over a year ago. And one of the things that's always been kind of interesting for me is this idea of like, how do you become native to a place, and how do you like fully fit into natural systems? And obviously we have great examples of that in the tribal nations in the upper Midwest, who are obviously fully native to this place. And so every time I get a chance to talk with folks like Jerry, I kind of ask that question of like, what does the process look like for me as a white person who's we think of as been here for a long time, 100 years, which is nothing. What does that look like for me to become native to this place in a way that's not about taking from indigenous culture here, but is trying to fit in. And what Jerry said, I mean just really appreciated, which is basically like, you I mean, you just do it. You work at it. And a big part of that is the ritual and story that you tell. And that doesn't have to be, borrowed from anybody else. You just do what comes from your heart and what makes sense related to your connection to that place. And so we try to build that in a way that makes sense as part of this process, and other things that we do. Um, but it's most apparent to us at the beginning of tapping season, right? It's this big celebration. We're back in the woods, and fortunately, last year we tapped just before kind of all the COVID restrictions got put in place, and we had a few people out. And this year we are going to have small groups out again, um, in a way that's going to be safe for all of us. But we're excited to be able to share that again, basically from a real ritual standpoint, and people can kind of connect to that however makes sense to them. But it is a critically important part to us living well in this place, for sure.
Love it. The so the seasonal and fun idea is centered exactly around that. Bringing it back to the health, fitness, wellness world, and what Kat was talking about, even with sugar, and what Jeremy's talking about with how do you become native to a place. We've become, and by we, in the health, fitness, wellness sphere, dietary guidelines, it's always, we compartmentalize everything, and it's broken into these tiny little things, and you'll have an entire textbook devoted to metabolic pathways and calories, but no one actually knows how to live with the land, off the land, from the land where they live, right? Like, it's, the diet is the Mediterranean diet. It's the what is it? The blue region studies and all this other stuff that gets mentioned, and all the Netflix documentaries about let's juice our food and throw half of it away because we're just going to drink the juice because that's healthy, or something that's grown halfway around the world. It's a superfood. That's obviously better for us. My conversation with people is, let's start locally. Like, get to know your farmers, see what they're growing. What are they producing that you think you would eat? Start there, grow from there, and we can have the conversation later about which diet is best. Because at the end of the day, that doesn't matter if we don't have a planet to eat from. So no, I love it. What you're both sharing is totally true. For people listening, sugar is not the devil. Calm down. Maybe try more maple syrup. It'll be better. You'll learn more about it, and it tastes better than just all the other stuff out there. Yeah, I got some stevia dessert from someone the other day, and I really appreciate the love and the sentiment that went into it. But I'm a maple guy. There's
just think how good that would have been with maple syrup in it.
I know.
I mean, it is interesting though, the difference, and this gets to what Kat was talking about a little bit. Like, we have this weird relationship with food overall, but we also have this in particular weird relationship with sweetness, where we crave sweetness, but the sweetness that we crave essentially has no flavor. It's just sweet, right? And so that's like, when I run into people who don't like maple syrup, that's usually the issue, right? It's like, oh, it's so strongly flavored. Like, what is that? What are you talking about? I just don't, it's so weird. But it's because people just want sweet, nothing, no complexity to it. It's just a simple sweet that we've, so many people have grown up on. But that is the beauty of maple syrup. You get not just some sweet, you get flavor, and that terroir that Kat was mentioning. You get the taste of the land from where that syrup was made, and all kinds of other stuff built into the process, how it's cooked and how it's handled, and all of those things. But that's the thing that's amazing to me about maple syrup. And it's the thing that is devilish about sugar is how much there is and how little we pay attention to it, right? And by paying attention to sweetness and seeking flavor, you can shift that that relationship, right? It's not just you're craving sweet. You want something that tastes really good and has some complexity to it, and then you don't need as much of it, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera.
There
Well,
is, I'm
well
just gonna
said.
say, oh, sorry, I'm interrupting now.
No, you're good.
Well, I was gonna say, I do actually think that there is, for all the reasons not to have tons of white refined sugar and to choose things in their more natural form, I think that there is a breaks, like a biological breaks that is more likely to kick in. And my anecdotal evidence, which is not that high, but with both maple syrup and honey, like my kids will stop, like they self-regulate. One of the most amazing things, and this is now me talking about honey, but the first year we took honey from bees, we pulled out a frame and we gave my kids spoons and we sat down at a picnic table, which seems like the most dangerous thing to do with small children. And they got to uncap the honey. And if you haven't had raw honey with wax, it's like the best chewing gum on earth. And I expected to have to cut them off. And they each ate like 3 or 4 tablespoons and then they were done. They were like, okay, I'm going to go in the house and get some water. And it was like a totally different response than they have to candy. Like candy is, and part of it probably is the cultural differences, like the way in which you experience it is part of it's cultural. Like there's always this kind of off limits thing with candy that's kind of like, oh, you can only get a certain amount of candy, so you have to like shove it in your face. It's kind of the way I think adults who have to say like, oh, I'm being so bad before they eat chocolate cake. It's like a similar cultural phenomenon. But just having honey or like 10 gallons of maple syrup in front of you, you don't eat it in the same way because of the cultural context. But I do think there's probably something also to the flavor that there is a lot of flavor to it. And so it gets a little intense after you've had a lot of it versus, just, mint candy or whatever. I don't eat candy because I'm using the example of mint candy.
Toothpaste candy.
I eat like grandma candy. I'm like black licorice, like the
Yeah.
things that nobody else likes. But
Anise
I do
and
think
clover or clove.
Yeah.
I'm like the worst. But I do think that there is something both culturally and biologically to, interacting with sugar in a way that's different. It's not just this like, off limits, I don't know, binge special thing. It's special in a different way. And that's something, that everyone should celebrate when you think about even sourcing maple syrup from different people, tasting those differences, because it does taste different. I guarantee that Jeremy's syrup and my syrup, even though they're produced not that far away from each other, taste different. And, even maple syrup, obviously from like Quebec and Vermont, tastes significantly different.
Without a doubt. The what you're just touching on is a big part of like what we talk about with nutrition, diet and everything with a lot of people is satiety. Like we're guilted and like freaked out about food and what's available, what's out there. And then so much of quote unquote food, industrial food, is designed to get you to eat more of it, right? Like that's the whole point of it. Whereas something like honey maple syrup, yeah, you tell people like you only get to sweeten things with those things, they use way less of it because there's more nuance, there's more depth to the flavor. It hits on like different aspects of people's psyche. And then once again, like you said, once you tell a person they can have something without guilt, without shame, without, belittling them because they're eating it or making it like taboo, like all of this weird energy around it gets removed. So it's, yeah, no, you nailed it, Kat. Totally agree with you.
Yeah. This there's a whole nother aspect of this that's super fascinating to me too. And so I'll preface it with, like the number one complaint I hear about maple syrup is that it's expensive, right? It's more expensive than, the crap you
Corn
buy.
syrup.
Yeah, right. But that's another symptom of our food system, right? So, just what we were talking about, if you use maple syrup in a way that it should be used compared to the amount of sugar that people typically use, it's actually cheaper, probably
Mhm.
directly cheaper to use the maple syrup but then you combine all of the health aspects and, the, like you were talking about, the desire just to use more and more and more. And on the industrial side of things, there's a whole different calculation of what the costs are, right? And value to the farmer and all of those things. And I just think it just gets super fascinating once you stop to begin to think about, like, what does something cost and what's its value, and what are the impacts of that on yourself and the whole rest of the system that you're operating in.
Like,
Yes.
definitely.
I do tell my kids that, like, they are going to have to continue to make maple syrup, though, because they cannot afford their habit. I'm like, if you had to buy the maple syrup and honey you use, the way you use it, you're like making this vat of like some, like, that's what they use as sweetener. And I'm like, I mean, it's great, but you can't use it like that if you're like testing out a weird concoction recipe. Like, oh no.
You just
Why?
You just described my Instant Pot. That's like how I cook with my, if I'm questioning my recipe, I'm like, maple syrup. That'll fix anything I screwed up.
I mean, it kind of does. If you look at every recipe, it always, like, I don't use recipes again. Like, I'm the worst. I cannot follow a recipe for more than like the first two things, and then I'm like, I got inspired, I'll just let it go. It's like I'm like using totally different spices and making a totally different thing immediately. But I do have to say, if you look at regular recipes in books, they often have sugar or honey. Like, every dressing on earth has sugar or honey. You might as well make it maple syrup. It makes it better. Like, use the maple syrup in your chili instead of sugar, for goodness sake.
Mm-hmm. So somebody was bottling like a maple vinaigrette. It was like a fermented maple, like the last residual bits of the boiling process they made into a vinaigrette.
Nice.
And I instantly wanted all of it.
Yeah.
So
Abby thinks, Abby, who's my wife and co-owner at Tapped, she thinks that's our first non like maple syrup product, maple based product. But
do it.
Yeah,
I like it.
Ginger,
it's pretty
maple
good.
Ginger vinaigrette.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Just put that on everything. Shots of it.
Yeah.
So we're at a good transition. That you were talking about kind of how farmers, landowners are compensated for the work, for the time, and then also I'm going to use that to kind of transition into the economics of it. We talked earlier about Wendell Berry saying if you can't find a way for your land, or paraphrasing again, to have value, someone else will, and their ideas might not align with yours. I always think of a interview with Gary V. I don't know if both of you are familiar with him. Gary Vaynerchuk is his name. He's big in like the whole rise and grind kind of culture. He's done well with the online sales type thing, but he's got a video where he talks about, when I see a undeveloped chunk of property, all I want to do is put up a mall and a parking lot. And I get so disgusted like with that thought. Like, I remember listening to that podcast or whatever it was on, and I instantly like screamed, and have made it a mission ever since to like fight that, because I think that is how a lot of people think. They, right away, well, it's not developed, we should put something there because something's better than what's there, because that doesn't have value.
Just how we talk about it is amazing, right? Undeveloped land.
Yeah.
It's the most diverse and productive land we have, probably.
Exactly. So the value of it, I guess, let's talk about that. Is it could be like what it provides, obviously, to each of your businesses, but to the land, what else, I guess, is it adding to the land, or the value of the land? That makes sense.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, I will say, in terms of, it's funny because I'm doing all this nerdy, like, business, big shocker, business planning stuff right now. And I'm doing this farm finance boot camp. These are like what Kat Becker does in the winter. And and I was like looking at the return on investment. They have all these like different ways of looking at your business. And I was like, well, this picture, you know, it shows 50 acres. So like my return per acre is like really bad if you look at it that way. But like I'm really farming 5 acres and then like the maple syrup woods, like maybe like another 5 to 7 for like 6 weeks. So like if you just look at the land that I'm actually actively farming, like my return on investment's incredible. I mean, like, and I mean, that's a really interesting way of thinking about land. Like one of the things I value so much about my farm, and Jeremy was just kind of getting at this in his comments, but like, is that I'm able to make a living. Maple syrup and the woods are part of it. And certainly we have not pushed them. We don't push them. But it also allows us to care for other parts of the land in really intense ways as well. Like, you know, if my vegetables, I wasn't managing them really intensively and productively and paying attention to the soil, you know, that I do have an annual production, I couldn't have like 3 acres in beneficial insect habitat that I'm managing, or I couldn't be managing sections of the woods that were clear cut not that long ago, you know, as we think about having more diverse species and cutting stuff out of them. And so, you know, as a farm, a lot of the ways that we get economic value out of parts of that system fit together with the management of the whole system. And I think it is important, you know, to be able to meet basic financial goals, to be able to manage, you know, we have a lot of water on our farm. So we have a pond and we have a freshwater like trout stream that runs through the farm. And we're able to manage those resources really well because of the fact that we have so much woods and that we can derive some of the value from those woods. I mean, I think Jeremy probably has a better sense of this than I do, but a lot of the way that people manage their woods is through pretty heavy cutting systems, because that's the only way that they're able to pay their property taxes in rural areas and feel like they have enough income to do that. And maple syrup is another way. I mean, being able to derive multiple products, you know, we have some mushrooms in our woods as well, but being able to manage the woods as a system is another way. And I think that that is important for thinking about, you know, setting up more sustainable woodland systems that aren't just dependent on cutting contracts, which is, you know, pretty much the dominant system, at least around here, other than maple syrup.
Yeah, that's all spot on. As I look at it, I mean, I'm a woods person. Like that's where I, you know, love to be and feel comfortable. Put me in a field and I'm a little bit out of place, but, so, you know, I have a pretty skewed perspective of things, but you know, if you look at, you know, the healthiest soil, the best water retention, the most diverse places in this part of the world are in forests, right? And so the more forest that we can maintain, the better. And of course, we need land, like Kat is talking about as well, that is managed really well for other food production. It's not to say we should, you know, just have all forest, but when we can create those spaces and integrate those systems, like Kat was talking about, to have forests as part of those productive systems, we get all those benefits, right? And so what you trade off a little bit in highly productive ag field, you gain in the forest from carbon sequestration, additional carbon sequestration, water retention, all those kind of things. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, for me, this ties into the bigger picture of maple syrup. Like Kat said, like we have this kind of incredible potential for maple syrup production in what I would call, you know, the sugar maple nation region of the upper Great Lakes. And Vermont is the largest maple syrup producer in the country, but we have more maple trees than they do, actually. And this region is the highest density sugar maple in the world, extends into the Northeast, and you know, Canada has a ton of it in Quebec, but we're right in the heart of it, and we have such amazing potential from an economic standpoint in a way that allows us to really develop sustainably. Like we can continue to care for those forests, generate some economic revenue, you know, maybe shut down some sugar cane fields down in the south where there should be swamp, and some other big goals like that. But yeah, I mean, regardless, I think it needs to be thought of more kind of consistently from an agricultural standpoint of how can we generate some revenue off of this and integrate it with the rest of our farm systems, like Cat does. So yeah, lots of potential there.
Like it. All right, we're gonna wrap this up for everyone and be respectful of both of your time. Thank you again for coming on. But the question I posed way at the start before we started recording. So what's new and exciting this year for your businesses, for maple syrup? We'll do a little plug for each of your businesses for everyone listening that can go and support you.
Okay, I'm just going in turn. I think that's our rhythm here so far. In terms of maple syrup, I kind of mentioned we're expanding a little bit, but I think our big expansion is not even a real thing. But as we move forward in developing that part of the farm, we have a bunch happening in the next few years. But we did certify our maple syrup organic this past year, which we didn't get into, but I can answer lots of questions if anyone wants to email me. And then on the rest of the farm level, I mean, there's a lot of super amazing, interesting stuff happening in the food system. Yeah, part of it related to COVID. So, the things I'm most excited about are actually working with some deliveries of food boxes, kind of like CSAs, to food banks in the area and developing that. We did a pilot program of that this past year, Marathon County. You can all follow me on like Instagram and Facebook, and then you'll be able to donate money when we start, directing money to those programs specifically. We're also looking to do more of that in the Stevens Point area over the next couple of years. So that's what I'm most excited about. Clearly, that's not like the way for everyone to access my food, but that's like what I've been waiting for is a food systems level change for like my whole life. So that's really exciting to me. The idea that the people that need food the most and get the best food, that's like as a society where I feel like we need to be. And then in terms of like farm business food stuff, we're working on, we always have our stuff at the Stevens Point Co-op and Downtown Grocery, and we'll be at the Wausau Farmers Market. And if anyone in the Point area wants our food, you can order weekly for either bike delivery from Curbwise or pick up at Farm Shed May through November. So we've expanded our online store, and we'll be doing more promotion of that as I roll out my new and improved website. So that's kind of farm business stuff, and maple syrup is in there. But yeah, those are the things I'm most excited about for this year. And the idea that I might be able to eat in a restaurant by like the fall, I'm also personally excited about. I haven't done anything. I live with my like almost 80-year-old mother. So that really put a kibosh on social activities for the last 12 months. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to and what's cool and new around here.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'll just say two things in response to Kat. One, for anybody who's like wondering where the edge of the food system work is, you definitely need to be following Kat. I mean, there's so many amazing things happening that she's leading. And then the second one is I just wish I had Kat's energy. Like I still don't know how you do it. It's amazing. But yeah, so I try my best. I just yeah, can't keep up. So with Tapped, I don't know what's new. Lots of cool stuff. We're actually coming out. I don't know that we're gonna release a new syrup this year, which is kind of interesting. We've generally done that every year, but we're sitting pretty well right now. There are a couple in development. One that I'm really excited about, but I think the timing is going to be off a little bit. I'm really interested in connecting beer and maple syrup in a much better way, and so there. On the home brewer side, one of the things, there's a syrup that actually comes out of Germany for use in wheat beers. And it's a Woodruff syrup. It turns out Woodruff has coumarin in it, and it's not a legal food product in the United States. But so I'm trying to figure out a replacement for that. But it's a syrup that gets added to wheat beers, particularly in the spring. And I'm playing around with some flavors in there that are in the kind of flowery side of things, like Mexican marigolds and some other things. So that's down the line a little bit, but fun to play with. The other one that's been really fun is we have a new partnership with District 1 Brewing in Stevens Point, and they I think I can say this. I don't think I'm too far out ahead. They have a French toast beer that they've been brewing kind of in-house, but that's getting ready to be released in cans, and that has our cinnamon infused maple syrup in it. So it's just like this amazing pairing. It's a French toast stout. So you imagine drinking French toast, and
That sounds good.
yeah, it's good. It's amazing. So we're super excited
Sounds
about that.
great.
Yeah. So we just continue to look for collaborations like that, and continue to build new products around other people's interest and creativity and energy. That's what I rely on people for, coming up with good ideas that we can implement and building off their energy. So and we've been we're fortunate to be surrounded by lots of amazing folks. So yeah, we're looking forward to another amazing year. We're going to do some different things with how we kind of package Tapped and connect it with other products from the Great Lakes region, which we're pretty excited about. Introducing the Tapped community to other small food businesses in the region, and doing some stuff like that. But so there are always a lot going on, never enough time to get everything done. But yeah, we're excited to launch into this new year for sure. And I agree, Bill, back to the beginning, this is the start of 2021 right now. Like we made it to the new year. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you both for coming on, sharing your time with everyone, and everyone listening. Go buy maple syrup and other fine products from these two businesses. So support local and get outside for sure.
You should all buy the ginger.
Yep.
Oh,
we lost Cat a little bit.
Cat,
Ginger,
no.
yeah. Our
maple syrup, because it's like both of our products. Jeremy gets ginger from me, so you can hit two birds with one stone.
That's right. It's amazing that we can grow ginger in Wisconsin. That was like one of our super exciting partnerships for sure.
Tapped ginger maple syrup. Get on it.
That's right. Cool.